everyone, my name is Jane and welcome to my January wrap-up. This is the time to talk about all the books that I read in January. I know that this wrap-up is a little bit late and overall my uploading schedule wasn't really good this month, but I'm sorry, just sometimes life gets in the way. But now I'm back and I'm so excited to share my thoughts about all the books that I read in January. And in general, I'm really excited about this wrap-up because I'm going to change a little bit my wrap-up format. Not something major, I just started to track more things this year in 2022 than I used to track last year. I'm also going every month to go over the prompts from my TBR game and to see if I finish them or not. Because I'm a mood reader, I never finish my TBRs, but I really want to finish the prompts, also if I'm changing the books. And also I want to try something different today. Usually I talk about the books that I read in the order that I read them, but today I really want to try and talk about them from my least favorite to the most favorite book that I read. I'm not sure if it's going to work out, but I really want to try it. So please let me know if you want to see it happening also in the future, or if you prefer me to talk about the books in the order that I read them. Now, because I read a lot of books in January, I know that this wrap-up is going to be pretty long, so I think that let's start with the stats. I love stats. It's so fun to look back at the month. Now, I read in January 11 books, which is amazing. I do usually read more than 10 books a month, but one of my goals for 2022 is to try not to pressure myself and not to try read a lot of books if I don't want to. And I feel that me reading 11 books in January and me being ahead of my reading challenge is already good and makes me feel less pressured, which is amazing. Now, formats is really interesting. I read 3 physical books. I read 2 audiobooks. The most books that I read were ebooks and I read 4 of them. I read also 1 physical manga and also 1 book that I read in mixed media. And usually audiobooks takes at least half of the books that I read each month because I do read a lot of audiobooks. This month I was working a lot from home, so I didn't really listen to a lot of audiobooks. I also didn't really want to, which is okay because you don't always want to read audiobooks. So that's really interesting that most of my reading were ebooks. I am getting more into ebooks recently, especially because I bought a Kindle. So I'm glad that I'm using my Kindle. And out of the 11 books that I read in January, 6 of them were on my physical TBR, which is amazing. I really want to lower my physical TBR. Now the next start is languages. I am reading in 2 languages, English and my native language, and I didn't talk about it in my 2022 reading goals, but I do want to read at least 2 books in my native language each month because I do love reading in my native language. I just don't read a lot of because in English there is so much more variety of books that I want to read. But this month I read 8 books in English and 3 in my native language. I feel like it's a very good number, at least 2, so that's amazing. Now, age group. I read 3 YA books, 3 new adult books, and 5 adult books. I feel like it's nice. I do try to read less YA recently and I feel like I'm doing good with that. Now, standalones and series. I read 7 standalones and 4 series. Usually I do read more standalones than series. That's really logical. Now, out of those series, 3 of them were series that I started and I didn't finish any series this month. And now, pages. The shorter book that I read this month is Every Heart a Doorway by Shannon McGuire. This book has 173 pages, so this is the shortest book that I read this month. And the longest book that I read is Keeping 14, which had 916 pages. Yes, that's crazy. Now, the more crazy thing is that my average pages that I read this month for a book is 466. Like, I don't think that my average pages per month was ever over 400, and it's over 450. Like, that's so much. That's because I read a lot of really long books this month. This is really amazing. And I read this month 2 new releases from 2021 because we are still in the beginning of 2022. I do consider them new releases. And yes, now genres. I love saying which genres I read. I do try to read a lot of different genres, but this month I read mostly one genre, and this is romance. I read 4 romance books. Also read 2 contemporaries. I read 2 fantasy books, 1 thriller, 1 horror, and 1 magical realism. I will be more aware of which genres I read in February because I do want to read more genres than only romance, but lately I'm really in a romance mood, and I'm already for 3 months reading mostly romances. I just enjoy it so much. So it was definitely really fun to read mostly romances this month. And now star rating. Like you can see, I read 5 stars this month, which is amazing. Like already the first month of the year had 5 stars. Last year I had only 5 stars, which is nothing, but I'm sure that 2022 is going to be my reading year, and I'm sure that I'm going to have a lot of 5 stars. So I'm really excited that I have one for this month. I also have 1 4.5 stars, 3 4 stars, 3 3.5 stars, and I had 2 books that I didn't enjoy. One of them were 1.5 stars, and the second one was 1 star. I also have 1 book that I didn't rate, and I will talk about it when we will get to it. But like you can see, I had books that I really disliked this month, but the rest were 3 stars and more, which is really amazing. And also, if I'm not looking at the star ratings, I still really enjoyed reading this month. Like, I just really enjoyed the act of reading. It actually felt like a hobby and something that I'm really enjoying from. And my average rating for January is 3.45. It isn't the highest, but I feel like the 2 1 stars really lowered this average star rating. But still, like you can see, most of the books that I read, I really enjoyed this month, which is again amazing. Now, before I will start talking about the books, I want to go over the prompts from my TBR game, the TBR of colors. Again, I'm a mood reader. It means that I never finish my TBRs. This is just how I read. I can't really force myself to read something that I'm not in the mood of, but I really want to try and actually complete all of the prompts from my TBR game. And the prompts this month were an orange color, a green color, a book that is matching the current season, which is winter, a white color, and a gray color. Most of them are colors because my TBR game is based on colors. But yes, orange I did complete. I read Keeping 13, and like you can see, the cover isn't orange, but I read it in my native language, and the cover in my native language is orange. I also completed green because I read Every Heart a Doorway by Shannon Maguire. This is actually the book that I planned to read for green, so this is amazing. To match a current season, I did complete, and I read In a Dark Wood by Rhodes. I was planning to read it for the white prompt, but I read another book for the white, and this book was Ibitsu, so I also completed the white. And for grey, I actually read the book that I was planning to read for grey, and this is The Poppy War by R.F. Kong. So like you can see, I actually completed all the 5 prompts for my TBR game, which is so fun. I'm not sure what will happen if I won't complete my prompts. I will probably punish myself in my TBR game or something like this. And yes, now I'm finally going to talk about the books that I read this month. And again, I'm going to talk about them from my least favorite to the most favorite. Please tell me if you love this format or not. So yes, let's talk about the books, and I'm going to start with my least favorite book that I read this month, and this is the 1 star. And this is In a Dark Wood by Rhodes. This is a standalone thriller mystery. It has 308 pages, and I read it as an audiobook, and I finished it in 2 days. I read it for the Enchanted book club, our book club of me and my booktube friends. We had a live show discussing this book, and because we already had a live show, I'm going to link the live show in the video description. So if you want to see my full thoughts, you can check the live show. I will be talking about it really quickly. But basically, this is the only Rhodes book that I read that I actually didn't enjoy. I read 3 other books by her that I really enjoyed, and this is the only one that I didn't love. And this is Rhodes' debut, and the thing is that this book also really felt like a debut, and also really felt like a draft. It didn't really feel to me like a completed copy of a book. It just felt like a draft, like a lot of things weren't really explained fully, and a lot of things weren't really finalized. The plot wasn't really logical in a lot of places, and the characters were so annoying. Like, it's about a woman that is going to a party in the woods to meet friends from 10 years ago, but all of them, although they are already mature, they acted like teenagers, which didn't make sense to their age. But although this book was really bad, in my opinion, it was pretty funny to listen to it because it was so ridiculous in how much didn't felt to me like an actual book, that it just was fun because I listened to something that was just so ridiculous. But obviously it's 1 star. It didn't really feel to me like an actual book, just a draft of a book that isn't released yet. I won't recommend this book. The second book that I disliked the most this month is the 1.5 stars, and this is Every Heart a Doorway by Shannon Maguire. This is a 4th book in a series. Currently there is 7 books in the series, I think, but I'm pretty sure that this is an ongoing series. It's a fantasy, but the 4th book was also a murder mystery, and it has 173 pages, the shortest book that I read this month. I read it in mixed media because I started to read it physically, and then I switched to the audiobook, and it took me 3 days to finish it. Now, the thing is that I really anticipated this book. I actually wanted to really enjoy it. I think that the idea is amazing because we're following a child that went to another world, to just another dimension that is really different from the place that we know, and she felt really in place there. She felt like this is her home, but now she came back to Earth and she needs to accept that this is her reality and that she isn't going back to the world that felt like home to her. So she is going to this kind of school with a lot of children like her that were in different worlds, and now they need to accept that they are in this world and not in their actual home. So the idea was really, really amazing, and I do think that this book had so much potential. But honestly, I'm so mad at this book. Like, I didn't just give it 1.5 stars. I'm so mad at it. It made me so bitter, especially because it had such a good premise and such a good idea, but the execution was so bad that honestly I can't understand how this series is so popular. Like, I'm so happy that other people enjoy this series. I wish that I enjoyed it, but I didn't expect the dialogues and the plot and the characters to be like this. Again, the fantasy was amazing, but it was so vague that I didn't understand the fantasy at all. Like, there wasn't any explanation, just a lot of words and a lot of facts about how the fantasy works and how everyone are different from each other. But throughout the whole book, it wasn't actually explained, and it's really hard for me to read a fantasy book and not to understand how the magic system works. The thing that bothered me the most were the characters and their dialogues. They didn't feel to me like real people. They were so weird, but not in a way that their personality just weird and quirky, just in a way that they talked like not real people. The dialogues were so weird, like just so weird. There was also one point in the book that they were talking about something and then it went to another conversation, and I think that this topic that they talked about is really important, and I really love seeing characters in books talking about the stuff because it's important. But the thing is that I just felt like the author threw this topic out there. It wasn't related to anything that they were talking about before, and I feel like throughout the book it was like this with the thing that they represented. The representation here is so good. Like, a lot of characters represented a lot of stuff, and it's amazing that we have representation in books, but honestly it just felt to me like the author followed a checklist and just made those characters represent something just for the sake of representing something, although it wasn't really connected to the character and to the personality of the character. I just felt like the things that they represented were just facts that the author threw in the book that again weren't relatable to anything. This book and the characters didn't make sense to me, and again the dialogues were so weird. I can't understand how they became in the position that they are talking about those weird stuff that aren't even connected to what is happening in the plot or aren't connected to their past or to their personality. And also I think that this is a YA book, but there were pretty gore stuff here, and I'm okay with gore. Like, I'm really okay, but I felt like it was really unnecessary in this book, and I feel like just everything was unnecessary in this book, and I wish that this book was more longer and more logical with more explanations about the fantasy element, and I wish that the characters weren't so weird that it didn't really feel to me like a real character or a real person, because it just felt to me like all the characters had 3 different personalities. And yes, this book just felt so weird to me. I'm really bitter about this book because it had a great potential, and this is also the reason that I switched to the audiobook, because I couldn't keep reading it because it was just so bad for me personally. So I finished it only because the audiobook, and yes, I thought that maybe I will give the second book a chance, but now after 2-3 weeks has passed, I just know that it won't happen. Now the next book that I read is a book that I'm really sad that is in the bottom of the list of the books that I least enjoy this month, but this is The Poppy War by R.F. Kong. Now this is a 4th book in a trilogy. It's an adult fantasy. It has 527 pages. I read it physically and it took me 8 days to finish it, which is pretty crazy. Yes, the book is long, but it never takes me 8 days to finish a book because I personally read really fast and I don't have a star rating for this book. Now basically this is another book that I read for a read-along, for the Poppy War read-along, so I will leave the live in the video description so you can again see my full thoughts on the book. But the main thing is that I read it not in the mood, and because I'm a mood reader, no matter how much the book is good, if I'm reading it not in the mood, I just won't enjoy it. I did enjoy the first half of the book. If I wasn't in the perfect mood, it didn't feel to me like a book that I dislike, just a book that I wasn't really in the mood of. But the second half really destroyed the book for me, and I'm not going to talk about it too much because I don't want to make spoilers, but a lot of things happened that made me feel disconnected from the book and just disconnected from the characters. In the second half I just stopped cared about the story and about the plot and the characters, and the reason that I'm not going to give it a star rating is because I read it for a read read-along, and if I didn't had the read-along, I knew that I won't keep reading it and that I will save it for another time, so I don't feel like I'm really in a place to give a star rating, because I don't feel like it will be really objective, because I read it not in the mood. So I know that if I read it in the right mood, I would feel better about it maybe, and maybe I would still really dislike the second part, but unfortunately I didn't really enjoy it. And yes, I'm just not really in a fantasy mood lately, so it's really hard for me to read fantasies, especially adult fantasies. I just don't think that I really read it in the right time. Now we're getting to the better books that I read this month. From now on, everything is 3.5 and more stars, so all of those books are books that I really enjoyed from. And the first one is How to Hack a Heartbreak by Christine Rockway. This is a standalone, it's a contemporary romance, and it has 352 pages. I read it in an audiobook and I finished it in 2 days. The star rating is 3.5 stars because I really enjoyed this book, like it was a really great time, but I feel like this book was really exaggerated. And basically we're following a woman that is working in tech. She is an IT in a really bad company, and this company consists of mostly men that are really mean to her because she is a woman. And the whole theme of this book was girl power, and that girls needs to be strong and that they can't really trust men, especially with dating and everything. And I really loved the theme of girl power, like it's always amazing. It was really interesting to see it in this book because the main character works in IT and she really wants to be a developer. Like she studied to be a developer, but she couldn't get a job. But throughout the book, she is starting to build a website. So we're really seeing her developing the website and all the things that are related to developing a website. Now, I am a developer, so it was really nice to read a book that is related to my career. But what I didn't like about this book is that, again, everything was so exaggerated. In this book, all the men were bad, but in a way that I don't feel like it's really realistic. Like the main character tried to get a job at developing, but this book made the impression that as a woman, you can't get a job as a developer, which isn't right. Like, obviously, I'm a developer. There is so many girls in high tech. I do think it's really, really good to be aware of it and be aware that there is less women than men in the tech field. But this book just acted like all the men are evil. As a woman, you just can't get a job at tech, which again isn't true. A lot of people in the Goodreads reviews say the same thing. It just didn't feel realistic because yes, you have a lot of bad men in the world, but also a lot of bad women. And again, it's really good that we have books about girl power. Like it's really, really important, but just not to this amount. It is already felt to me like the author just hate men in general. But although it was really exaggerated, I still really enjoy it, especially because it was reading a book about my career and like about things that I work on every day. So it was really fun in that sense. And although it was exaggerated, I still enjoyed it. It's just the least favorite book that I read from the books that I enjoyed this month, but it was still a really nice book, just a little bit too much. Now the next book is a 5-star prediction that I had. And unfortunately, I was really disappointed from this book. It still was 3.5 stars, which is still good. Like it wasn't a bad book, but I really, really wished that it would be more than that. This book is You Must Not Miss by Katrina Leno. This is a standalone and it's magical realism with horror, but I didn't really feel like it was a horror. For me, it felt more like magical realism. It has 290 pages. I read it physically and I read it in 2 days. And the thing is that if you know me, you know that Horrid by Katrina Leno was one of my most favorite books that I read in 2021. I really love this book. This is a YA horror and it was just so amazing. I enjoyed it so much. So obviously I had really high expectations from this book, especially because this is the only other horror that Katrina Leno ever wrote. So I was really expecting it and I really hoped that it will be similar to Horrid, but it was hard for me to connect to the characters. I don't feel like I really connected to them to the same amount as Horrid. And just in overall, I didn't really connect to the story. Like I read it and I was intrigued and I wanted to keep reading. Also the book read so quickly. I finished it in 2 days because it was fun to read it. Like you just read quickly. I feel like Katrina Leno writing is so good. Like this is the thing that made me love Horrid so much. That her writing is really touching. But although it was so good and intriguing in this book, I didn't feel like it touched me. And so the main character, she wasn't bad, but something happened to her that made her feel really angry about the world and about her family and friends. And this thing that happened was revealed only really in the end of the book. And I feel like if we knew this thing earlier on, it will be better for me to connect to the character and to actually understand her. Also, it was a magical realism, and I feel like magical realism in general is just not for me. Usually when I read magical realism, I don't enjoy it. I think that just the thing that is a little bit of fantasy, but a little bit not, and we don't really understand what it is. I feel like this really makes me not enjoy a book because I need more explanations when it comes to fantasy and what is happening. And all the magical realism didn't really make sense to me because it's magical realism. It doesn't really need to make sense. I still feel like the writing is good, and Katrina Leno is so good in setting a scene. She just makes you actually feel like you're in the story and like you are in the scene of what is happening. She's really good with the atmosphere of her books, so I really enjoyed this aspect of this book. But yes, in general, I was really disappointed from it. I do think that if I would go to this book without expectations and without reading Horrid, I would enjoy it so much more, but I just can't control it. Like, you read a really good book from an author, obviously you're going to expect to love also the other books from this author. But yes, I would suggest reading this before Horrid, because Horrid was also released later, and her writing is much better in Horrid, in my opinion. But yes, in overall, it was a nice book, 3.5 stars. It wasn't average, it was a little bit more. Just in general, I'm still pretty sad that it wasn't 5 stars. Now the next book is the fourth book that I read in 2022, and I think it was a great read to start the year, and this is Idle Gossip by Alexandra Lee Young. I really enjoyed this book because basically this is a contemporary about K-pop, and I love K-pop. Now this is a standalone, it's a contemporary without romance, which is amazing. It has 352 pages. I read it physically and it took me 2 days to read it. And basically we're following a teenager that is moving to Seoul in South Korea with her family, and then one day she is with her sister in a karaoke bar. The main character loves to sing, and then a scout from a really big K-pop company is hearing her sing, and this scout asking for her to come to an audition to be a part of this K-pop company. And obviously she's getting to the company, and then she's starting to train to be a K-pop idol. Now I have a lot of mixed feelings about this book. The premise and the plot sound perfect for me, and this is the reason that I enjoy this book so much, because I do really love K-pop, and I feel like the research about K-pop was good and bad in both ways. I read a lot of books about K-pop, and I feel like this book had the most information about K-pop and how K-pop works, and all the fandoms and light stakes and shows, and just how the whole concept of K-pop works, especially between K-pop fans and the idols. So I feel like this book had so much information, more than any other book that I read about this topic. But at the same time, there were 2 or 3 really big stuff that didn't make sense in how K-pop work. Like, for example, the main character signed a contract to be a part of this company, and it was really weird for me because she signed a contract to already be an idol. Although usually people are going to train for a lot of years before they start being idols. And also the main character was so annoying. I feel like all characters in the book were amazing except the main character. And also I read the reviews in Goodreads. Nobody liked the main character. She was really annoying, and she was always the one that acted really childish. All the problems that were in the book were because of her and how she acted. So it was really hard because she's the main character and you're supposed to connect to the main character, but I really can't because she's so annoying. But still, this book felt really genuine in a lot of places, and I actually really hope that the author will write a sequel about this story that isn't following the main character but other characters, because I think that he would really love a story of this kind. So yes, this book was really good. Like, honestly, it was really good, and the reason that it isn't 4 stars is because those really big facts that didn't make sense in this book, but except it was really enjoyable, and again a great start for the year. And now we're getting to the 4 stars. The first 4 star is Dirty Letters by V. Killand and Penelope Ward. Now this is a standalone, it's a romance contemporary, and it has 347 pages. I read it in an ebook in my native language, and I finished it in a few hours, so in one day. Basically, this book was just a fun, steamy romance. We're following a woman and a man that when they were small, they were pen pals from school. The girl was from the US and the boy was from England, I think. They basically knew each other for years. They talked in letters for years. But in the end of high school, something really bad happened to the main character. So she just disappeared from everywhere. She just stopped talking with everyone. Now, a lot of years later, their connection is getting reunited again. And obviously, there is more tension that wasn't there when they were younger. Now, the thing is that I really enjoyed this book book, like obviously I gave it 4 stars. I read it in one day. It was a really, really fun, steamy read. I do feel like the characters were deep, but at the same time, the plot was interesting. The only thing is that I do feel like this book is pretty forgettable. Like I read it something I feel like 2 weeks ago, and I already don't really remember a lot from this book. I just feel like this is those kind of books that while I'm reading it, it's so fun, but then I just forget about them. But overall, I really enjoyed it. I would recommend it because it was fun, especially if you are looking for a steamy time. Now, the next 4 stars is a manga that I read, and this is Ibitsu by Haruto. This is a standalone. It's a horror manga, and it has 416 pages. I read it as a physical manga, and I read it in a few hours, so again, in a day, just because this is a manga. I'm really trying to get more into manga this year because I love graphic novels, and I did really love anime when I was a child. I'm just not watching shows anymore, so I feel like manga in general will be really fun to me. And I read this manga, and it actually took me a little bit time in the beginning to get into the story, for it was really intriguing, but this story kept surprising me, especially in the end, because there were a lot of backstories and things that I didn't expect. It was a really gore book, it was a really horror manga, and in this manga there is just a legend that is following this girl. I think that her name is Ibitsu, but I already don't remember. And this girl basically asks someone if this someone has a sister, and then she is trying to become the sister of the man that she is asking. So we're following someone that she asked him the question, and because he answered her, she doesn't leave him. It was a really fun time, and especially again I was really surprised because in the end there were a lot of backstories and things that I didn't expect. This manga just became more deep than I expected, especially when I started to read it. But it was just a really great time, and I enjoyed reading it. It was one of the first books that I read this month, and it was definitely a really fun manga, and I really want to check more horror manga in the near future. Now the next book is my 4.5 stars, the book that I loved so much, and this is All Rhodes Lead Here by Mariana Zapata. This is the second book that I'm reading from Mariana Zapata, and I really, really love her book so far. Like, I really love her writing. This is a standalone romance. It has 551 pages, so a lot of pages. I read it as an ebook, and it took me 5 days to finish it. And this is basically a small town romance that I realized on myself that I really, really love. And we're following a woman that went through a really bad divorce recently, just 1 year ago, and she's trying to find herself. So she has decided to move to the town she grew in when she was a child. Her mother passed away when she was, I think, 12 or 14, and from there she moved to live with her uncle and aunt. But before that, she really loved this town, so she just decided to move back there to try to be more connected to her mother and to see how her life will be there. This is a very character-heavy book. Like, it almost didn't have any plot. Mariana Zapata books are really slow burn, like really, really slow burn, and usually I really don't enjoy those kinds of books, but Mariana Zapata just makes me really enjoy her writing and really enjoy her books. I really felt connected to the characters. It isn't a 5 star to me because most of the book felt to me like 4 stars, but especially in the end I got even more invested in the characters and I loved them even more. So I did higher it up to 5 stars in Goodreads, but it's still 4.5 stars to me because it wasn't perfect. I didn't love it to the amount of a 5 stars, but I still really, really enjoyed this book. Like, it was so good. It was just so fun to read it, and I think that Mariana Zapata books are just so good. I'm so excited to check more books by her and to read more books by her. And yes, I really, really enjoyed it. It's definitely a book that I would really recommend. Now, my last reads are 2 books from a series. One of them is 4 stars and the other one is 5 stars. This is the last thing that I read in January, so this is the most recent thing. I love this series so much. Basically, this is the Boys of Tomen series. The first book is Binding 14 and the second one is Keeping 14. This is a kind of ongoing series. I think there is supposed to be 7 books in this series. Currently, only the first books were out, and there isn't any release date for the fourth, and I really want the fourth to be released because I really want to continue the series. This is a romance contemporary series. The first book had 905 pages, and the second one had 914 pages. In the edition that I read them as an ebook. The first one took me 3 days to finish. The second one took me 5 days to finish. And the thing is that it was really hard for me to decide on a star rating, and I will explain why. But firstly, this is a high school romance. This series really felt trashy to me, but in the best way possible. I didn't feel this way from a series since I read After by Anna Todd when I was in high school, which is a really, really trashy series. Now, the thing in this series is that it is really trashy, but at the same time, there is a lot of trigger warnings. It does touch a lot of really hard topics in the plot, like a lot of hard things are happening, so please make sure to check trigger warnings. But this book was a high school romance. I'm categorizing it as a new adult because although this book book wasn't steamy, it was still pretty sexual and like still talked a lot about those topics too. Now basically the reason that it was really hard for me to choose a star rating is because I read the whole series in my native language. The two books are really long, so in my native language they separated the two books into 4 books. I read the series as 4 books and it's so easy for me to decide the rating for the 4 books. Like the first one is definitely a 4-star, the second one is a 5-star, the third one is a 3-star, and the last one is a 5-star. It was also my most favorite one. But like you can see, the 2 books that are related to each other are never the same rating, which made things really hard for me. I decided in the end to give the first book 5 stars because I really wanted to give one of those books 5 stars because this series is definitely a series that was 5 stars in some places to me. Like I really enjoyed the book. I thought it was so good, and again it was really trashy and it did felt childish in some places, but in a way that it just made the story more genuine and more real. They actually felt to me like real teenagers. Everything was so genuine there, so I really wanted to give one book 5 stars, and my favorite book was the last one, the 4th one, but my least favorite book was the 4th one. They are basically the same book, so although I really wanted to give the last book 5 stars, I decided to give it 4 stars because if I'm trying to look at the 2 books, I definitely think that the second book, like the last book, was definitely more longer than it should be. That's why I didn't enjoy like the 4th part of the second book because it was really long. I do feel like the end was perfect, again 5 stars, but the first half of the book wasn't good. It was too long, so that's why I gave it 4 stars to the whole book in the end, because I just feel bad giving it 5 stars when I really didn't enjoy the first half of the book. But overall this series was just so amazing. I really hope that the author is going to release the next books in the series soon. I know that the next books in the series are going to follow different couples. Like the first books that I read were about the same couple, but the next books are going to be different couples, and every couple is going to get 1 book and not 2 like the first one. The couple that is most interesting to me is the couple that is going to be in the 5th book. There is a lot of time until the 5th book will be released because there isn't any release date for the 4th yet, but I'm really excited to read it and I really hope that it will happen soon. I wasn't so excited about a series for so long. It was trashy, but it just made me enjoy so much. Like I just couldn't leave the books. I couldn't stop reading them because they were so much fun. It's definitely a series that I recommend, and this series definitely made January an amazing reading month, and hopefully the 4th book will be out somewhere soon because I'm really expecting it. And yes, finally those are the whole books that I read in January. I know that this wrap up is so long, I'm sorry. I just really wanted to share all of the stats and also all of my full thoughts about these books. Most of them were really enjoyable, but also the ones that weren't, I really wanted to talk about them and to say my opinion about them. So I'm sorry this video is so long, but January was really good. For there were some really bad reads, most of them were really enjoyable, and I have 5 stars this year, which is amazing. Like last year my first 5-star was something in June, I think, so now it's already in January, and I believe that 2022 is going to be an amazing reading year. I really hope that you enjoyed this video. Please tell me what is the best book that you read in January, what is your most favorite read. But yes, I really hope that you enjoyed, and I will see you in the next video. Bye everyone!